If you were a Sega fan in the 1990s, chances are you were also a fan of Streets of Rage. Whether it was the Sega Genesis, the Sega Game Gear, or the Sega Master System, there was a Streets of Rage just for you. But what made Streets of Rage so special? Was it the cool gameplay mechanics or the great character and stage designs? Or maybe it was the kick-ass soundtrack that accompanied each and every one? I tend to think it was a melding of all these things that just hit all the major notes of what we wanted in a beat-em-up. It was so different from the other stuff out there, and you could only play it on Sega's hardware. Sadly, after the third game on the Genesis, Streets of Rage would go into a 25+ year hibernation. There was no Sega Saturn Streets of Rage, no Dreamcast Streets of Rage, and when Sega went third party, there continued to be no new Streets of Rage. So when it was announced in 2018 that a new game was coming, I was absolutely shocked. It's been a heck of a long wait, but finally we have a new game in this awesome series. This, my friends, is Streets of Rage 4. This new entry was handled by the development tandem of LizardCube, Dotemu, and Guard Crush Games. Their mission was to bring this ancient series back from the dead, both by giving old school fans something to feel good about, but also making sure it had the content and appeal to win over new fans. When you first fire up Streets of Rage 4, you pretty much can only play the story and battle mode. The story is fairly self-explanatory. Here you will get the how and why all these characters are back together and what they are fighting for. Without spoiling too much, 10 years have passed since the third game. Mr. X had a couple of kids that were spoiled rotten and ready to take his place once they had a plan. That plan is to use a sort of sound hypnotism to make people do what they want, and so steps in our heroes to try and stop them. The battle mode is a versus game where you can choose your arena and character and duke it out against a friend. After you beat the game, you then open up arcade mode, which is a 1 credit only, no save option that should only be attempted once you have the skills to realistically have a chance. Stage select allows you to play individual stages either for practice or just because they're your favorite. There are 12 stages in total. You also can choose Boss Rush, which is exactly as it sounds. There's an extras area that has loads of artwork to look at, including some early screens and concept designs, and the options allows you to change what the food looks like, change your controls around, and change the standard soundtrack to legacy music from the older games. There is also a 2-player online multiplayer mode you can choose as well. Perhaps the most important part of the Streets of Rage experience was its fantastic gameplay. The developers obviously took that seriously because this game plays as great as you could have hoped. The core mechanics of the original trilogy were respected and brought forward here. The standard combos feel just like they should. The grapple initiates where you expect it to, and your special attacks are employed just like you remember. Of course, a whole bunch of new stuff has been added as well. Your special attacks have been expanded to include offensive and defensive uses, including variations you can do in the air. They still use some of your life, but a successful follow-up attack will allow you to get it back. If you take damage afterwards though, you lose that health as well as whatever the damage was worth. It's a give and take system that adds a ton to the old school style and keeps you on your toes. There's also a robust juggle system in place that allows you to rack up some big damage by keeping enemies in the air and continuing the damage on their nearby friends. Just in the few hours I had spent capturing this footage, I saw combos above 50 hits fairly often. This system is not just limited to you either, and the computer AI can do it to you and your friends just as easily. In fact, get yourself in a bad enough position and you can lose damn near an entire life bar getting yourself tossed helplessly all around the stage. The familiar air recovery from previous games is back and more important than ever, because now you can ease your pain a bit from just about anything that knocks you down. You also need to be aware that enemies, especially the boss guys, all have moves that render them invincible just long enough to knock you out of your combos and even special moves. If you see a bad guy flashing, it usually means he is about to do something you need to get away from or can't knock him or her out of. All in all, this new entry pays homage to the heart of the old school games, while adding enough to make it feel exciting again. You'll spend hours trying to link different moves and specials together for bigger and better combos across all the playable characters. And speaking of characters, you have the option of 4 fighters right from the get-go. You can choose Old Man Axel Stone, Super MILF Blaze Fielding, the daughter of Adam Hunter Cherry, and newcomer Floyd, who has powerful cybernetic arms. You open up additional characters either by meeting them in the story or gaining score during the game. Reach certain milestones and you'll open up another entry. I won't spoil too much here, but I'm glad to say Adam is back and as awesome as ever, and you even get to play as the sprites from the previous games, complete with the gameplay styles intact. One of my initial areas of concern was the visual style of the game. For lack of a better term, they appeared low budget and sort of like something you'd see in the Apple Store for your iPhone. After playing through twice now, I can happily report that this is a great looking game. The sheer amount of detail in these environments is insane. From reflections in water, to steam rising from sewers and chimneys, to bugs flying around lampposts, these stages are alive with movement and energy. Each animation is a sight to behold all its own, and each scene is absolutely filled with them. You can't have that kind of detail and animation in your stages and not have them in your characters, and again the developers nailed it. Many of these degenerates are based off of the enemies from previous games, with a new coat of paint and tons of new animations for their movements and attacks. In short, they never looked so good and they fit their surroundings like a glove. There's even areas that have multiple background layers that give the lovely sense of old school parallax scrolling, an absolute must for any retro revival. I'll finish by saying this: my initial fears were utterly unfounded. Streets of Rage 4 is a visual masterpiece. Perhaps almost as important as the gameplay, the sound and music is a huge piece of the Streets of Rage success story. So how do the new tunes fare? Are they as epic as the originals? It would be a mistake for me to compare them directly because the old games are so fondly remembered by me. Without waxing nostalgia too much here, it would be impossible for the new music to ever supplant my love of the originals. The new stuff is quite good, however, and most of it does fit every scene and fight as it should. Some of it is low-key and ominous, some of it rocks out, and some of it is pure dance electronica. There's bound to be something here you like, and even if there isn't, just cut on the retro soundtracks and enjoy listening to the old stuff you already know and love. My only real complaint here is that I really wish the developers had included an option to play the exact music you wanted on demand in the options. A jukebox would have been killer. The gameplay you have seen here is actually from the first time I fired it up and played it. I have learned so much since and unlocked a ton more. I can tell you that the fan service is strong with this one, and each new thing I found or opened up brought a smile to my face. This isn't just a good game, it's a good Streets of Rage game. It doesn't try and reinvent the wheel, nor should it have. The core tenets of what made this series great didn't need an overhaul. It needed additions to add to the already well-established fun factor. Those complaining that it's stuck in the 90s or that it doesn't push the genre forward don't seem to understand just how unfair it is to heap that criticism on the shoulders of a single game. Reinvention in this hobby comes once a generation or two, if we're lucky, and a game pursuing excellence in its well-established wheelhouse should not be so easily dismissed. Can you imagine if such a thing was done to a game like Red Dead Redemption 2? Oh, I'm sorry, it simply didn't reinvent anything that the first did before it. Therefore, it's simply not a good game. Streets of Rage 4 didn't need to do anything more than be a great Streets of Rage game. And if you wanted something entirely different, you shouldn't be playing something with a 4 in its title that's in a genre that's over 30 years old. My personal nitpicks are few, and mostly concentrated on options like the previously mentioned retro music, and things like the original Streets of Rage cast lacking any sort of special attack, gimping them on harder difficulties. Still, add in the 4-player local co-op play, the unlockables that need multiple play sessions to secure them all, and a general quality that sits well above your typical beat 'em up, and you have a winner here that is well deserving of the name it bears. I'm Sega Lord X. Thank you guys for watching, and I will catch you next time.